Have you ever sat down to relax and immediately felt like you should be doing something productive instead? Maybe you've taken a day off but spent it feeling anxious about all the things you're not accomplishing. Or maybe you can't enjoy a quiet moment without your mind whispering that you're being lazy, that you're wasting time, that you should be doing more. If this sounds familiar, you're experiencing something deeply common and quietly exhausting: the guilt of resting. People who feel guilty for resting aren't lazy. In fact, they're often the opposite. They're hardworking, responsible, and achievement-oriented. But somewhere along the way, they learn that their worth is tied to their productivity. And now, even when their body and mind desperately need rest, they can't give themselves permission to stop. Let's explore the psychology of people who feel guilty for resting and understand where this guilt comes from and what it's really trying to tell you. But before we dive in, if you're enjoying this exploration of human behavior, consider subscribing to Mura Psychology for more insights into the psychology that shapes who you are. Rest is a biological necessity. Your body needs it to repair, your brain needs it to process information, and your nervous system needs it to regulate. Yet for many people, rest feels wrong. It feels indulgent, selfish, or lazy. This disconnect between what your body needs and what your mind allows reveals something important about the beliefs you carry about productivity, worth, and what it means to deserve comfort. Psychologically, guilt around resting is often rooted in conditioning. From a young age, many people are taught that their value comes from what they produce. They're praised for good grades, for being helpful, for staying busy. They're criticized or dismissed when they're idle. Over time, this creates an internal belief system that equates worth with output. If you're not producing, you're not valuable. If you're resting, you're failing. This belief is reinforced by the culture around us. We live in a society that glorifies busyness. People wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. They brag about how little sleep they get, how packed their schedules are, how much they're juggling. Rest is seen as something you earn only after you've done enough. And for people who internalize this message, enough never comes. There's always one more task, one more goal, one more thing that needs attention. So rest gets pushed aside, and guilt fills the space where peace should be. There's also the fear of falling behind. People who feel guilty for resting often believe that if they stop, even for a moment, they'll lose their edge, they'll fall behind their peers, miss opportunities, or prove that they're not as capable as they thought. This fear drives them to keep moving, keep producing, keep achieving. But the cost is high: chronic stress, burnout, and a constant sense of not being enough. Another factor is low self-worth. When you don't believe you're inherently valuable, you try to earn your value through what you do. Rest feels threatening because it forces you to exist without doing. And if your worth is tied to productivity, existing without producing feels like proof that you don't matter. This creates a painful cycle. You rest, you feel guilty, you work harder to compensate, you burn out, and then you need rest again. But the guilt remains, so the cycle continues. Now let's explore the 5 key traits that define people who feel guilty for resting. If you recognize yourself in these traits, know that this guilt isn't serving you. It's a pattern you learned, and it's one you can unlearn.
The first trait is perfectionism and high standards. People who feel guilty for resting often hold themselves to impossibly high expectations. They believe they should always be improving, always achieving, always doing more. Rest feels like settling or giving up. They look at downtime as wasted potential rather than necessary recovery. This perfectionism is often rooted in fear: fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being good enough. So they push themselves relentlessly, believing that if they just work hard enough, they'll finally feel secure. But that security never comes because the standards keep rising. No amount of achievement satisfies the internal voice that says you're not doing enough. The second trait is difficulty setting boundaries. People who feel guilty for resting often struggle to say no. They take on too much because they don't want to disappoint others or appear incapable. They prioritize other people's needs over their own. And when they finally have free time, they feel guilty for not filling it with more obligations. This difficulty with boundaries comes from a belief that their needs are less important than others, that taking time for themselves is selfish. So they give and give until they have nothing left, and even then, they feel guilty for needing to rest. The third trait is internalized productivity culture. People who feel guilty for resting have absorbed the message that productivity equals worth. They've internalized the idea that time is money, that idle hands are the devil's workshop, that rest is something you earn, not something you need. This belief system doesn't come from them. It comes from years of cultural messaging, from parents, teachers, employers, and media that all reinforce the same idea. Your value is what you produce, and if you're not producing, you're wasting your life. Unlearning this requires recognizing that these beliefs aren't truth. They're just stories that serve a capitalist system that benefits from your constant labor, not your well-being. The fourth trait is anxiety and hypervigilance. People who feel guilty for resting are often anxious individuals. Their minds are constantly scanning for threats, for things that need attention, for problems to solve. Rest feels dangerous because it requires lowering your guard. And if you've learned that the world isn't safe unless you're constantly vigilant, relaxing feels reckless. This hypervigilance is exhausting. It keeps your nervous system in a state of chronic activation. Your body never fully relaxes because your mind is always preparing for the next crisis. Over time, this leads to burnout, physical illness, and emotional depletion. The fifth trait is lack of self-compassion. People who feel guilty for resting are often incredibly hard on themselves. They criticize themselves for needing breaks. They compare themselves to others who seem to handle more with less rest. They push through exhaustion because they believe rest is a sign of weakness. This lack of self-compassion creates a harsh internal environment. Instead of treating themselves with the kindness they'd offer a friend, they operate from a place of judgment and demand, and this makes rest feel like failure rather than self-care. Understanding these traits can help you see that guilt around resting isn't about laziness. It's about deeply ingrained beliefs that were taught to you, beliefs that no longer serve you. The truth is, rest is not something you earn, it's something you need. Your body doesn't care how much you've accomplished, it needs recovery regardless. And denying yourself rest doesn't make you stronger, it makes you depleted.
If you're someone who feels guilty for resting, learning to shift this pattern starts with challenging the beliefs underneath it. When you notice the guilt rising, pause. Ask yourself, where did I learn that rest is bad? Is this belief actually true? Would I judge a friend for resting? Probably not. So why are you holding yourself to a different standard? It's also helpful to reframe rest as productive. Rest isn't the opposite of productivity, it's what makes sustained productivity possible. Athletes understand this. They know that recovery is when muscles grow stronger. They know that rest prevents injury and improves performance. The same is true for mental and emotional work. Rest is when your brain consolidates learning. It's when creativity emerges. It's when your nervous system resets. Without rest, you're running on empty, and eventually you'll crash. Another important practice is scheduling rest the same way you schedule work. If rest is always something you'll do later, it will never happen. Put it on your calendar. Treat it as non-negotiable. Give yourself permission to rest without needing to justify it. You don't need to be sick or burned out to deserve a break. You deserve rest simply because you're human. Research supports the importance of rest for well-being. Studies show that chronic stress and lack of rest lead to serious health consequences, including heart disease, weakened immune function, and mental health struggles. Rest isn't a luxury, it's essential for survival. In cultures that prioritize rest, like those with afternoon siestas or strong vacation policies, show better health outcomes and higher life satisfaction. History also offers perspective. The concept of the weekend is relatively recent, introduced in the early 1900s after labor movements fought for workers' rights. Before that, people worked every day with little rest. The idea that rest is something you earn is a modern construct, one that serves economic systems more than human well-being.
Throughout most of human history, rest was woven into daily life. People rested when the sun set, they took breaks throughout the day, they honored seasons of activity in seasons of rest. We've lost that rhythm, and we're paying the price. If you're someone who feels guilty for resting, and you've been pushing yourself to the edge for too long, let this be your permission to stop. You don't have to prove your worth through constant productivity. You're valuable simply because you exist. Your rest isn't laziness, it's wisdom, it's self-respect. It's an act of rebellion against a system that wants to extract every ounce of energy from you without giving anything back. So, the next time guilt whispers that you should be doing more, remind yourself that rest is doing something. It's caring for yourself. It's honoring your limits. It's choosing long-term health over short-term approval. And that choice is brave, not weak. If this resonates with you, take a moment to reflect. When was the last time you rested without guilt? And what would it feel like to give yourself permission to rest, fully and without apology? That permission is yours to give. Remember, feeling guilty for resting isn't a sign that you're lazy. It's a sign that you've been taught to value yourself only for what you produce, and that teaching is wrong. You are worthy of rest. You are worthy of peace. You are worthy of care. That truth doesn't change, no matter how much the world tries to tell you otherwise.